Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the MMA Corner News Show as we give you our thoughts and feelings on the top news stories going on in MMA. As always, this episode is brought to you by Battle Bomb, the only pain reliever with the knockout power. BattleBomb.com. Check them out. Bony Thigh, love their products. If you're into losing weight, all that kind of stuff, check them out. I'm your host, Josh Davis. Tonight we have a full panel with us. Jason Schielke, lifestyles and a whole bunch of other stuff manager at the MMA Corner. Jason, what's up?
What's going on, fellas?
News manager at the MMAcorner.com, Jose Youngs.
What's up, guys? Just chilling.
And the man that runs all of our videos and does all of that kind of stuff, pimping, Trey Downey. What's up, Trey?
How's it going?
Well, I will tell you this. In Colorado, it's freezing. We're freaking breaking records here with how cold it is. But other than that, things are well. We do have a lot to talk about in a short amount of time to do so. Let's get right into it. ESPN, or I guess I should say, Chael Sonnen made a big announcement today, and that's that he decided to partner up with ESPN to continue to grow ESPN into the biggest sports media conglomerate in the world. And by Chael's press release that he sent out to all of us today, he basically said, you know, he's the number one sports media guy out there, and he's teaming up with the number two sports media company in ESPN, and together they're going to take over the world. So, in all seriousness, though, what do you guys think about this? I know Chael is Chael, and he talks about how great he is, but really, ESPN, they are obviously the biggest sports media company out there. They don't focus a whole lot on MMA. Occasionally, on a pay-per-view night, they'll give you the results on the little scrolling bar at the bottom, but that's about it. So, again, first off, twofold question here. What do you guys think of this as far as ESPN hiring Chael Sonnen? What do you think they're actually going to do with this? I mean, seriously, where do you think they're going? Let's start with you, Trey.
Well, ESPN's coverage of MMA has pretty much gone down and down since they lost John Anik to the UFC years ago. John Anik, when he hosted MMA Live, was a great program on ESPN.com, and then eventually it moved on to ESPN2, but shortly after Anik left, and now does play-by-play duties and the Ultimate Insider with the UFC. As far as Chael going to ESPN for MMA, that might mean that ESPN is going to give MMA, a bigger presence on the channel. Chael is one of the biggest personalities in MMA. People tune in to watch Chael to hear what he's going to say. As an analyst, Chael hasn't always been my personal favorite. I mean, he's a great talker. He's great at promoting things, but not necessarily in the analyst role. But him going to ESPN, it can only mean good things as far as how much coverage they're going to give the sport. He's going to be on SportsCenter Friday, I believe they announced, talking about UFC 180, and I'm sure he'll be on there Saturday night after the fights go down. It's going to be great to see Chael. It's kind of sketchy, the thing with ESPN hiring him. I mean, he's almost like maybe even the Jose Canseco of mixed martial arts, and I think ESPN would laugh at the notion of them ever hiring Jose Canseco to be on Baseball Tonight or something like that. But I think Chael's personality is just what gets people to tune in, and people are going to tune in. He's not the best MMA analyst in the world, but he's going to get people to tune in. If ESPN covers MMA more, that's only good for the sport.
Here's the thing. Baseball, which ESPN covers immensely, is full of steroids. We all know that. And let's say a guy like Ryan Baum, for instance, who tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. Let's say he retires and wants to become an analyst. I have no doubts that ESPN would give him an opportunity. The thing is, I don't really think that they care. I don't think they should care. I don't really think that Fox should care. But I digress. Shelky, give us your thoughts.
Well, my thought is there is never been a more polarizing figure in mixed martial arts than Chael Sonnen. Every time he gets behind the mic, you know it's going to be gold. He's never going to be stale. He's never going to give you some canned response. He's always going to tell you what he thinks and give you his upfront, honest answer in the way he always does. I mean, whether it be satirical or confrontational or however he chooses to approach it, you're going to get Chael Sonnen, and fans love to hear Chael Sonnen talk. And so I think that ESPN bringing him into the fold points to me that they are going to be reaching out to try to expand their coverage of mixed martial arts. Because, like I already said, when Chael talks, for some reason, people like to listen. So, to me, it just points to me that ESPN is looking to up their MMA coverage to the level, if not beyond, what they had whenever they had John Anik hosting their MMA show on ESPN2.
Say, give us your thoughts.
I think ESPN brought in Chael Sonnen just so they can throw him on those nonsense shows like First Take and Numbers Never Lie and Mike and Mike with all those, I want to say characters, not analysts. I would never classify Skip Bayless or Stephen A. Smith as analysts. They're going to throw him on there. He's going to say some nonsense things, and people are going to tune in and watch. It's one of those things where you're going to tune in because he's going to say something dumb, or you're going to tune in because you genuinely like him. But either way, you're going to have a very, like Jason said, he's very polarizing. There's no middle ground. You're going to tune in to hear him say something crazy, or you're going to tune in because you actually are a fan of him. And that's exactly what I get from everybody on ESPN2. I think he's going to be one of those staples on ESPN, on that channel. Not the big one for like UFC 180 and all the pay-per-views. Yeah, he'll be on there. But other than that, they might bring him in just so they can throw him on Mike and Mike or the Colin Cowherd show or any of those shows or maybe Around the Horn or Pardon the Interruption. So, but other than that, I think it's a good move for them because obviously Chael Sonnen has a huge fan base. But I don't think he's like Trey pointed out, he's not the best analyst, but he brings the eyeball. So I think it's perfect for ESPN2 and all of those not lesser shows, but all those shows where how a person acts and is a character is more important. Kind of like NFL Live.
I think this is great for ESPN. I'll get to that in a second. Now, you guys bring up the fact that Chael's not the best of analysts. You're right. He's not. But look how long he's been doing it. We're talking less than a year in all actuality. So give the man some time to practice, and like with anything, I think he will get good. He's a good talker. So given the right situation, I think he could be good for ESPN. And like you said, Jose, I think you start him off with the little 10-minute or I guess 8-minute, whatever, interview segment they do on Pardon the Interruption. Then maybe you bump him up, have him do a couple episodes of Around the Horn. I think he'd fit in well with those characters. But if they play their cards right, he could end up having his own show, very similar to what Jim Rome used to do for him back in the day, and interview all kinds of different athletes again, because he's a good talker, because he's Chael Sonnen. He'll push buttons, he'll say stuff that other people won't. He'll have fun with it. So I really do think that in the grand scheme of things, ESPN probably did themselves some favors here in just generating additional views, because people are going to tune in just to see what Chael Sonnen has to say. I will tell you this, I'm going to tune in just to see what Chael Sonnen has to say. I'm a fan. If that guy was running for governor, I would vote for him. So we'll see how it goes. Right. Sonnen, since we're moving right along into his best friend and Wanderlei Silva. It was recently announced that Wanderlei was going to be a part of Bellator and their fight week this week, leading up into Bellator 131. And obviously, it's now been announced that due to his contract with the UFC, he can't do that. All right. I want to get your guys' thoughts. First off, what did you actually think about Vandy doing some promotional work for Bellator? And number two, what do you think about the UFC basically kiboshing this? Dana White has said that Vandy is banned for life. He'll never fight for the UFC again, all of that kind of stuff. If that's the case, why not release him from his contract and let him go make money elsewhere? So I don't know. Give me your thoughts on both. First, let's start with you, Jose.
Well, when the news came out that Wanderlei Silva joined Bellator, my initial reaction was, of course he did, and of course they signed him. I mean, it's one of those things where when you hear they sign Royce Gracie, and you hear they sign Randy Couture and all these guys, the next logical person down the list would have to be Wanderlei Silva because he's kind of in, like, the crap house with Dan. It's one of those things where you're like, you know what would be so perfect if Wanderlei Silva just joined Bellator, and then it turns out he did. But then somebody goes, well, isn't he still under contract with the UFC? And then 24 hours later, which surprise, surprise, is pretty much how long it takes for somebody to file a cease and desist order, which I can't imagine the UFC didn't do. And it neither surprised me. I kind of figured he was going to go to Bellator when he dropped all these cryptic messages where it's like the world of MMA is never going to be the same on Twitter and stuff, and he's going to go to ONE FC or Bellator, and Bellator makes sense because Bellator is bringing all the old UFC Hall of Famers and veterans, and then less than 24 hours later, the UFC pushed a kibosh on it, and neither of them surprised me. I don't really care either way because it's not like I'm going to watch Bellator 131 just because Wanderlei is doing promo work for it, so it doesn't really bother me, but I kind of saw both outcomes coming.
Okay, give us your thoughts.
Well, Bellator signing all of these people just doesn't make sense to me anymore. If the guys aren't going to fight for your organization, what is the point? Just having them do promotional work, showing up at Dave & Buster's isn't going to make anybody else tune in to Spike TV to watch that on Saturday night. I get the Tito signing. I get the Stephan Bonner signing because they're actually fighting inside the cage. But what is the big deal of Royce Gracie being a Bellator ambassador? What is the big deal with Wanderlei being a Bellator ambassador? And no, I wasn't surprised because Wanderlei just wants to stick it to the UFC. And I'm not surprised that the UFC halted it. But I mean, at the same time, I understand why they did it, but at the same time, I don't, because I don't think it's going to matter at all for Bellator. The UFC just wants to stick it to Bellator because deep down the UFC knows that Wanderlei being at a Dave & Buster's party on Friday night isn't going to make more people watch Tito and Stephan fight on Saturday night. The same number of people were already going to watch that. The only thing, like I said, the only thing that would matter is if Wanderlei would have actually signed a contract to fight for Bellator. Then people would tune in to watch him fight. But all of these promotional little deals, even the one with Randy Couture, that one kind of made sense because they put him on the Fight Master show. They no longer have that. So it all just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand where Bellator is going with these guys. Use the money that you're going to pay these guys to do promo work to pay the guys that actually fight in your organization a little bit more money. That's my opinion on that.
Shelky, give us your thoughts.
I can tell you why they signed Wanderlei Silva to this promotional contract and why they have Randy Couture, why they have Royce Gracie. It's because of name recognition, which they don't have within their talent roster outside of Quentin Jackson, King Mo, and Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner. I mean, people, the casual fans know who Wanderlei Silva, they know who Randy Couture is, they know who Royce Gracie is. So that's the reason why they're bringing them on as ambassadors so they can throw their names around being associated with Bellator to catch the attention of the fans that may not be watching the product or may not have any clue who the hell Michael Chandler or Will Brooks is. Now, like the rest of the guys, I'm not surprised at all that the UFC, put the kibosh to it because if he is still under contract, they still do own his rights, even if he isn't going to be fighting anytime soon. So, he's going to be sitting not being able to make any money working for any other promotion until that contract, however long it lasts for, expires with the UFC.
Well, and to be real honest, I think Bellator was doing a couple of things here. First off, I think they were testing the waters to see exactly how the UFC was going to react if they went after Wanderlei Silva. And I do think they had the intentions of signing Wanderlei to fight again. Now, let's look at this. Wanderlei is suspended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and yes, they're pretty much the standard that everybody else kind of follows. But there's no guarantee that any other commission is going to honor Nevada's suspension. I can guarantee you that when Bellator goes to a state like Iowa, Wanderlei could fight there. When Bellator goes other places, there's opportunities for Wanderlei to fight outside of the UFC. So I kind of really just think Bellator was testing the waters to see what happened. And this is exactly what happened. Now they know that, Wanderlei's off limits. As far as them signing other UFC guys, here's the thing. They know these guys are not the long-term future of Bellator, but they are certainly the immediate future. What they do is get people to watch so they can throw their other fighters on cards and get them in front of people. Have Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner main event this card is obviously not because that's the best fight on the card. Michael Chandler versus Will Brooks is the best fight on the card. But they're doing it to get people to watch so they can showcase other talent. And they will continue to use guys like Rampage that has a big following, even though he's done as a fighter. They'll use guys like Tito, again, has a big following, done as a fighter, to get people to watch. So as they continue to grow it makes some sense that that's what they're doing. Again, this is why we're here on this internet show, and they're actually running business. All right, moving right along. A couple of fight cards were announced this week, and one I want to talk about specifically happens on Valentine's Day of 2015 right here in my hometown of Denver. A couple fights were announced for this card. First off, it's going to be a Fox Sports card, Fight Pass card. So it's not going to be super big. We're not getting the title fight or anything like that, but hopefully they do give us some big names. Right now we have Max Holloway versus Cole Miller. That's the fight we were talking about before we went on air. One I am looking forward to. Tim Elliott versus Zach Makovsky, and then Ray Borg versus Chris Kalades. So first off, give us your thoughts on the UFC coming back to Denver. Obviously, Denver is where it all started as far as the UFC goes. They have been back here periodically. They've given us some good title fights. They gave us John Jones versus Rampage Jackson. They gave us Ben Henderson and Frank Edgar. So we have had some solid cards here. But give us your thoughts on this. Let's start with you, Mr. Downey.
The UFC is going everywhere these days. It's going to be interesting to see when they have that big event on November 17th, and they announce the entire schedule for next year to see all of the places going to. Denver's a market that they need to be in. There's plenty of markets here in the United States that really are starting for MMA that showed it this past April, the event that's near and dear to my heart, when the UFC finally showed up in Orlando and blew Dana White out of the water when he said that he didn't even want the card there. So you take your time and you bring these shows to these areas, and it's gonna be interesting. I know you guys are excited. It's gonna be big time there's a lot of gyms in Colorado. It's one of the biggest hubs for fight camps other than South Florida and Vegas. So you're probably going to see a lot of local fighters on that card. The most interesting thing to me is that the UFC is putting on a card on Valentine's Day. That's the more interesting thing to me on this fight, because the UFC's demographic probably is more single men than married or men who have dates. But how many ladies are going to be letting their men watch fights on Valentine's Day. I don't see that one happen. I honestly think it's kind of a risky move for the UFC to do this card on Valentine's Day. But who knows? They'll have to put a big main event on there. I think we're going to see Holloway and Miller are going to be a main card fight. But it's hard to gauge a card this early on with only that one fight, that one bigger fight announced.
Well, and that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. The UFC's coming back to Denver, but really, are they coming back to Denver? They're coming back here on Valentine's Day. For their demographic, you might as well have been doing an event on frickin' Christmas, because I agree with Trey. My wife's not getting an issue with it because she's probably going to be watching the fights right next to me. But not everyone's in the same situation that I'm in, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Jose?
Okay, well, the first thing I want to say about this card is if you just look at all the fights, you see Holloway versus Miller, featherweight. You see McCoskey versus Elliott, flyweight. And you see Borg versus Kalidas, another flyweight. You don't see any of the big-name guys. Like, remember when Mark Hunt fought Ben Rothwell there? That was abysmal to watch. I mean, they both gassed, and it was just like two large, overweight guys just kind of slinging, like, punches like their arms were in water. So you're getting all of these lower weight classes, which I think is a very smart idea for them to do, because you kind of saw what happened when you get two unconditioned guys who aren't used to that altitude, who aren't in the best shape fighting for 3 rounds. And you guys are talking about how this thing is in Denver and it's on Valentine's Day. Well, who do we know that who's the biggest, highest profile couple in MMA right now? We got Pat Barry and Rose Namajunas. If Rose wins that championship belt on the Ultimate Fighter, I would not be surprised if they threw her in a main event on Valentine's Day and promote her as, oh, this is like I said, the most high-profile couple. It's Valentine's Day, and they're fighting, and she's fighting in her hometown. I don't like it. It wouldn't bother me if she was the main event, if she was the champion, but I just think they're going to wait to see. And if she does come out on top, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the main event, and that's how they promoted it.
No, I completely agree with you, because to be real honest, I know Colorado MMA well, and I honestly don't know who the UFC would be throwing on this card locally. I mean, they recently cut Chris Camozzi. He's got a fight coming up for Pride Fighting Championship, which is a promotion that Shane Carwin is part owner of, who, by the way, is a big man, trains at altitude. Doesn't bother him. Anyways, he recently got released. He's fighting Jeremy Kimball. A win over Jeremy Kimball's not getting him back in the UFC. He's not going to be on the card. Gilbert Jamal Smith, who was on the reality show, just got a big win at RFA 20. The UFC's already told him that he's got to do a whole lot more. Colorado doesn't have a whole lot of local guys. I mean, if Brandon Thatch is ready to go, I could see the UFC making him a main event, giving him someone like a Jordan Mean or something like that. But I really like where Jose's head's at with Rose winning the title. There's no way that she couldn't be the main event of this card, defending her belt. Because again, it's a Fox Sports 1 card, so it's not like we're getting an Anderson Silva or any big name like that. So I think depending on how things play out, that could be how it goes. Shelky, give us your thoughts.
Well, first, Josh, I got a question for you really quick. What was Stacy's first reaction when she found out that you were taking her to go see fights on Valentine's Day?
Well, she basically said, are we sitting cage side or are we buying tickets? So I guess a whole lot of that will actually depend on how well the UFC treats the MMA corner. So, but that was her first reaction. Are we buying tickets or are we sitting cage side?
Well, that's cool. See, at least you got a wife that's cool enough to go with you. But I mean, as far as the card, the way it's shaping up so far, Max Holloway, we've all been really high on this guy. You know that he'll come in, he'll fight anybody. I think putting up against Cole Miller's the tough. I think we were talking about before we went on the air. Cole Miller is going to be the toughest fight of his career, so it's going to be a great measuring stick to see if Max Holloway is the real deal.
Hold on. I gotta stop you. Just like I said before we went on air, Cole Miller is not Max Holloway's toughest fight. I mean, dude got in there with Conor McGregor. How do you not say that Conor's his toughest?
Okay.
Well, anyways, I digress. Moving back.
Okay. Well, let me rephrase that. Cole Miller's a good measuring stick to where Max Holloway is at this point of his career. Okay. And as far as, the UFC entering these markets, I don't care if it was Christmas, Valentine's Day, Hanukkah, Yom Kippur, Easter, Passover, whatever. If they brought the UFC to St. Louis or Kansas City, I would be ecstatic. I would drop whatever I was doing. I would miss my kid's birthday. I don't care. I would go if they would bring it to Kansas City, St. Louis. So yeah, I and like Jose brought up, that potential main event, couldn't ask for anything better for the show in Denver.
No, you really can't. You really can't. All right, let's move on. The Boston card, January 18th, 2015. This card, first off, is being main evented by Conor McGregor versus Dennis Siver of all people. That's a whole nother conversation. But this card is shaping up to be a styling card. There's a lot of great fights on this card. One of the things I want to ask, though, because this really shows how much Dana White and the rest of the UFC loves Conor McGregor and how big of a star they truly think that he is. Conor McGregor versus Dennis Siver is the main event of this card. The co-main event, Eddie Alvarez versus Ben Henderson. Now, when it's so hard for me to even think back to this. When when Eddie Alvarez was first going to come over to the UFC and he had to hold out and all that kind of stuff, in his contract, his first fight was set to be on Fox, not Fox Sports 1 or any of that stuff, on Fox, against Ben Henderson for the lightweight title. Now, again, a couple years later, things have happened for both fighters. They're both coming off losses. Now they're the co-main event behind Conor McGregor and Dennis Siver. I don't even know what to say about that. Jose, give us your thoughts first.
Well, I was at the last Boston card, and Conor McGregor was on the undercard, and that place went ballistic when he walked out. So the main event is a no-brainer. If you just say, oh, the UFC is going to Boston, I can guarantee you Conor McGregor is going to be the main event. As for the co-main event, I kind of like it. I mean, neither of them are champions. Both of them are coming off losses, and they were supposed to meet. I mean, why not now? I mean, they're both looking for fighters. I think they're both still like top 5 lightweights in the world, so I'm always down to watch that regardless of where it is on the fight on the card. And they added Philippou Uriah Hall Part 2. They both fought on the local circuit in New York, so Uriah Hall's kind of starting to come into his own. Well, not come into his own, he's not a prospect anymore, but he had all that hype behind him after the Ultimate Fighter, and he just didn't live up to it because he lost to 2 back-to-back against welterweights, then knocked out Chris Lieben, and people are like, oh, great, you knocked out Chris Lieben. And so if he can get past Philippou, he can kind of break through that hurdle where he isn't living up to it. And then you obviously got Masvidal and Park, which are both very highly touted fighters. I mean, Park is the Tough Smashes champion. I think he only has that one draw in the UFC, but other than that, he's undefeated. And Masvidal, I think his only loss was to Khabibov. I want to say Khabibov. I'm not 100% on that. And then they obviously added Paddy Houlihan, who was the #1 European flyweight in the world, Conor McGregor's teammate. Zhang Lipeng, who was the Tough China winner. I don't know if you guys even care about that. I don't really care about that, but it's always interesting to see how these international tough champions can handle coming to America and fighting. Because if you can't fight in America, I don't think you belong in the UFC. And so it'll be interesting to see how he can handle that time change and culture shock. And then you got Cathal Pendred, who is born in Boston and lives in Ireland. He's Conor McGregor's teammate. I mean, he tweeted today he doesn't have to go through visas or any of that stuff. He's just coming to Boston because this is where he's from. So I'm actually very excited for this fight card, and I'm actually trying to go to this one for sure.
Obviously Boston has the huge Irish presence, and so Conor McGregor. I don't have an issue with Conor headlining the card. I have an issue with Conor McGregor versus Dennis Seaver headlining.
Yeah, that is a little weird.
To me, that fight is a total joke. It makes no sense. And the UFC, and again, this is a completely different conversation. The UFC could find themselves on the wrong side of the stick here. If Dennis Seaver pulls off this upset, the UFC screwed because they got nothing left for Conor. It's not like they can, all right, Dennis Seaver's a new title contender, because he's not. And, you're not going to fool anyone with that garbage. So I don't know what the UFC was thinking here. And I love the fight between Eddie Alvarez and Ben Henderson. I think it's going to be the defeat that Eddie Alvarez needs to realize that in the UFC, he's a 145-pound fighter, not a 155-pound fighter. But again, for this card, when you just look at Conor McGregor versus Dennis Seaver, the headlining card should be Ben Henderson and Eddie Alvarez. And another reason why I say that is because of the amount of money that we're talking about here, sponsorship, all that kind of stuff. There's a different level between being the co-main event and the main event. And so, I don't know. Shelky, jump in here.
Well, my thoughts on it are, I think that they're putting Conor McGregor and Dennis Seaver as the main event, and having Benson Henderson and Eddie Alvarez sell it for him, because Conor McGregor and Dennis Seaver is going to be big fight locally in Boston. He's going to put the asses in the seats, but nationwide, I don't think that there's enough interest in Conor McGregor yet to put eyeballs on the event in the rest of the country and around the world. So putting Benson Henderson, Eddie Alvarez as the co-main on there, I think, is the main selling point of the card, because that's the fight that the fans, they know who Eddie Alvarez is, they know who Benson Henderson is. It's a fight that people have been wanting to see for years, and even though it's not for a title, I'm still amped up to see it. So I know that there's got to be a lot of other people like got to be still amped up to see it, even though it's not for the belt.
Yeah, like I said, I'm stoked to see it. Trey, give us your thoughts.
This is going to be a big card for the UFC, because I believe that this card, I believe January 18th is a Sunday, and a lot of the noise when this card was first announced, it is the same day as the NFC Championship game.
I think it's the AFC Championship game, so the Patriots will be in it.
Well, it's the same day as both. They both play on Sunday,
yeah,
right.
But the NFC Championship is what airs on Fox. So during the NFC Championship game, which more than 50 million people will be watching, there's going to be promos for this fight card that's coming up later on Fox Sports 1, probably around 10 p.m. or so. But the interesting thing will be is the NFL varies in scheduling as to what game goes on later. Usually the Championship Sunday, one game goes on around 3 o'clock, and then one game goes on around 6 o'clock. So if, say, the Patriots are playing in the AFC Championship game and that's on CBS at 6:30 at night, the UFC are not only going to get screwed in ticket sales, but people are going to be watching that game, and they're not going to get the full promotional skip over from if the NFC Championship game is on at night, and then as soon as that game goes off the air, they can say switch over to our sports channel, Fox Sports 1, and watch some UFC. So that's going to be a very interesting thing. And the UFC is trying to promote Conor McGregor as the next biggest star, and this fight's gonna get great ratings because Benson Henderson is the biggest ratings draw that the UFC has when it comes to Fox and Fox Sports 1. Other than the big heavyweight title fight, Benson Henderson's fights have been the highest rated fights on Fox and Fox Sports 1. So people are going to tune in for that, and the UFC is going to go that it's going to be Benson Henderson combined with the NFC Championship game, and the UFC is going to go, oh, look, Conor McGregor's a huge star, and then when he goes in against Jose Aldo and gets absolutely murdered, then we're going to, see what the deal is with Conor McGregor. But, it's just a case of the UFC it's going to get to the point where the UFC is trying too hard to shove this guy down our throat. And, you know, it's going to be a good card, but Benson Henderson and Eddie Alvarez is going to be the true main event of this card. The most interesting thing about this card is it's going to be Benson Henderson's first 3-round fight, and God knows how long. And we know how Benson Henderson is as far as, you know, being a slow starter or, you know, grinding out really close decisions. So it's going to be interesting to see how he fights. That's what I'm interested to see. Who cares about McGregor and Silva? You know, even though it would be nice to see McGregor take a couple spinning back kicks to the gut.
Jose, you got something to say?
Yeah, you know who doesn't care about American football? Ireland. Every single Irish person is going to tune into this fight, and that whole arena. I was at the TD Garden for that last fight, and I sat next to probably 50 Irish people, and they were like, "Yeah, my friends wanted to come, but they didn't have any tickets." The Patriots in the AFC Championship game, 90% of that stadium or arena could just be people from Ireland coming over. Plus, that I believe Benson Henderson's biggest rating draw was the UFC on Fox 5, and you know who people were on that card? Shogun Rua, massive superstar in Brazil. Alexander Gustafsson, massive superstar in Sweden. BJ Penn, just a massive star anyway. I mean, those are great power. Shoot.
Try.
Them being massive stars in other countries doesn't bring up the UFC, the United States television ratings.
Well,
it might bring in people from other countries to come and watch the fight, but that has nothing to do with the television ratings.
That one also was in the December card, which is historically known to have the higher ratings because it gets all that bump.
I was more referring to the fight this summer with Hobby Love.
That was big.
The bigger, and the rest of that card was not the greatest card, and Benson Henderson still drew huge numbers on that. And in the middle of the summer on Fox Sports 1, the biggest cards are during football season as well, when the UFC's drawn. So Henderson's a big draw for them.
You know, what is really going to be interesting is Jose seems dead set on it. The fact, if New England is in the AFC Championship game, if they're hosting, I mean, if they have home field and they're hosting that game, that'll be interesting to see how that city reacts with the Patriots in playoffs, Conor McGregor headlining a UFC event all on the same day. It could be a pretty crazy time, you know. So it'll definitely see how. All right, guys. There this weekend. Friday night we have Legacy. On Saturday we have Cage Warriors. We have World Series of Fighting. We have Bellator, and real quickly, World Series of Fighting, 3 title fights on that card. Then we have Bellator 131, and then we have UFC 180. So I'll throw it out there. If you, not one card, just one fight. If you can only see one fight this weekend, what's the fight you're most looking forward to? Let's start with Mr. Shelkey.
Verdum and Hunt, easily, because I could not pass up the opportunity of watching someone who entered the UFC with a sub 500 record win a title belt. Because if I recall correctly, Hunt entered the UFC with a record of 4-5.
And got armbarred by Sean McCorkle.
Yeah.
Big
And now he's fighting for the title against Fabricio Verdum. If he wins that belt, that'll be one of the most memorable experiences in all the years I've been watching MMA. And I would never, ever give up the opportunity to watch that. I don't care what the hell Bellator's putting on. I don't care about the 3 title fights from World Series of Fighting. I want to see if Mark Hunt can win a UFC belt.
All right. Trey, let's go to you.
You know, I know Jose over here is probably going to jump on the same bandwagon that Shelkey's going on, but I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate. That fight's going to be, you know, a heavyweight slugfest. We talked earlier about the elevation of Denver and how Mark Hunt looked when he fought in Denver. And if I'm not an expert on elevation around the world, but I think Mexico City has a pretty high elevation.
It's 24,000
feet. So there you go. which is higher than the Mile High City.
Yeah, I mean, and since he's been down in Mexico City for the past 2 weeks, he's not doing any training, any sparring at all. So I mean, I love Mark Hunt, and it'd be the most improbable underdog story in the history of MMA if Dana White puts a UFC belt around Mark Hunt's waist. But I just don't. I just don't know how he's going to perform, and that kind of, I want to save myself from that heartbreak. So I'm going to tune in. There's two great lightweight title fights this weekend. You've got Will Brooks, the guy with the biggest chip on his shoulder of anybody I've ever heard in MMA, and rightfully so, against Michael Chandler, who's really looking to right some wrongs. That's going to be a great fight. But the fight I'm interested in seeing, fight I'm going to be sitting live cage side to watch, is going to be Justin Gaethje and Melvin Guillard for the World Series of Fighting Lightweight Championship. Gaethje, I've seen him fight live in person twice now. The guy is a killer. He's in my opinion, he could beat Brooks and Chandler. I believe he is the best lightweight outside of the UFC, and I believe he could step right into the UFC and compete with the top 10 guys. And Melvin Guillard is by far the toughest test of his career. The two trained together for 6 months last year when Guillard was at Grudge, so they know each other very well. They're both killers on the feet. Gaethje comes forward. Guillard is a technical striker. It's going to be an aggressive, striking matchup. And if Gaethje beats Guillard, I really think that, Josh, you're going to be seeing Justin Gaethje in Denver in February making his UFC debut.
I have to agree with that. If he gets the victory, I would not be surprised. All right, Jose, give us your must-see fight of the weekend.
I was going to say Mark Hunt and Fabricio Verdum, but Jason took my idea. So I'm going to go with Ricardo Lamas versus Dennis Bermudez. One of the fights actually stayed on the card because obviously Dennis Bermudez has won 7 fights in a row, which I was there live for his Max Holloway fight, and that was pretty controversial. I actually scored that fight for Max Holloway, but it doesn't matter. He still got the win. But so he does have 7 fights in a row, and that should be enough for a title shot. I mean, he was winning fights before Conor McGregor was in the UFC, and he hasn't lost since he got armbarred by Diego Brandao, and Bermudez is winning that fight and then just got caught. So this is easily his biggest test. I mean, he's coming off that submission win over Clay Guida, and Clay Guida is like no joke, as all of you guys know. And if he can beat Ricardo Lamas in impressive fashion, I would love to see him get. I don't know who they could give him because it seems like everybody's tied up in the top of 145. Maybe I wouldn't give him Chad Mendes if he wins because I think Chad Mendes could beat Dennis Bermudez. I don't want to lose a title contender. And if Ricardo Lamas wins, that just throws him right back in the mix. So I think that in the co-main event between Ellenberger and Gastelum is also extremely interesting because if Ellenberger loses, I think that's the end of any talk with him in title contention. And if Kelvin Gastelum wins, and if Kelvin Gastelum does win, that he's like taking Ellenberger's place in the top 10. So those two fights outside of the main event are very interesting. It's just a shame that Diego Sanchez isn't on the fight card anymore.
Because I still want to see Diego Sanchez and Joe Lozon. I think that would be an awesome fight. Real quickly before I get into my must fight, if Dennis Bermudez does win, I would actually like to see him fight the loser. Yes, the loser of Cub Swanson and Frankie Edgar, and I'll tell you why. It does something to keep everybody relevant. Let's say Cub Swanson loses that fight. He fights Dennis Bermudez. He gets that win. Cub Swanson is right back into the title mix. So you keep your title contender. If Cub Swanson loses, Dennis Bermudez wins. How do you not give Dennis Bermudez a title shot? I mean, that's basically the stamp on the division that says, yeah, I deserve a title shot. So, and same thing with Frankie Edgar. So, I think that is how I would do it. But again, I'm not Joe Silva. I'm some idiot with a website. My must-see fight of the weekend. I agree with Trey. I'm so looking forward to Justin Gaethje and Melvin Guillard go at it. I've been in Grudge numerous times. I've seen those guys go at it in the gym. I think this is going to be a hell of a fight. I am really looking forward to that one. But since Trey took that one, I have to agree with Joki. You know, Mark Hunt and Fabricio Verdum. If Mark Hunt wins this title, yes, that is the biggest underdog story of probably the history of sports, really. That is something that Hollywood would make a movie out of. When the UFC bought Strikeforce, or actually, I'm sorry, when the UFC bought Pride, they didn't even want Mark Hunt. They tried to give him money to fight. They tried to buy out his contract, and he said, no, I still want to fight. Give me fights. Like Jose said, he got armbarred in his first fight. Since then, you know, his only losses to Junior Dos Santos. The guy is, you know, completely turned his career around at the age of 40. But again, I have to agree with Trey. Going up to altitude, losing 60 pounds to get down to fighting weight of 265 pounds, what's that going to do? How exciting of a fight is it going to be? I question it. So for me, I have to go with Will Brooks and Michael Chandler. I had the opportunity to talk with both of these guys this week about this fight, and hearing these two guys talk, I mean, we interview fighters all the time before fights. That's what we do. But hearing these two guys talk, they don't hate each other, so there's no, you know, shit talking between the two, but they both want this win, and they both are extremely confident that they're the better fighter and they're going to be able to do the things that they need to do to win. I think this is going to be an exciting fight. I think it's going to be as good as the first one, and so for me, that's the must-see fight. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. There you have it. That is our show. Shelky, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Next couple of days, keep an eye out on the website. Going to be having reviews up for this sweet SteelSeries Elite Prism Siberia headset, their Apex keyboard, and Assassin's Creed Unity, which just hit stores today. I'm still having visions of shanking people in my head right now, so gonna really want to check out those reviews.
Must be rough. Trey, final thoughts.
Like Jason said, look forward on the website to those things, and also look forward this weekend to my encompassing coverage of here in Tampa, Florida, of World Series of Fighting 15. Going to have post-fight video interviews with all the big winners from the night. So look forward to that this weekend, and it's just going to be a great Saturday night for all MMA fans. It reminds me of 4th of July weekend when we had the World Series of Fighting and the UFC on the same day. This time you've got 3 cards pretty much going on at the same time. But I mean, you can, you know, almost switch between and probably watch all 4 of the fights that we all talked about as the must-see fights. You could probably watch all of those by switching the channels and make probably the card of the year just by changing channels.
True that. Jose, final thoughts.
My shout out is going out to everybody's favorite news source, Reddit. People post our shows on Reddit, and we get good feedback. Some of them are positive, but just as many are negative. And I appreciate every single comment people have, because that is how we improve and we get better.
Oh God, not Reddit.
You know, it's funny. I actually go through, and I read all of the comments, and you know. A couple shows ago, people really blasted us, told us that we sucked, that we should fall down and die and not come back to life. And you know, there were some other good ones, some classic ones. But anyways, keep the comments coming, both positive and negative. I really do love the negative ones, because, like Jose said, that is how we get better. With that being said, a couple of housekeeping notes. First off, we will be back tomorrow night with a prediction show for UFC 180, and we'll probably do some predictions for Bellator 131 as well. And who knows, we might even throw a World Series of Fighting in there. We'll just have to wait and see how it goes. So that'll give you guys plenty more time to talk shit about us. Get on there. Tell us what you really think. Then we'll be back Saturday night live post-fight recap. We'll probably go through as many of the events as we possibly can. I know you guys are going to miss them, but guess what? It's our job to watch them all. So I will have 3 TVs in my living room, and I will be watching every one of the events. So that's how it's done. With that being said, I want to thank all of our military. I want to wish everybody a happy Veterans Day. Without you guys, I could not do all the rambling that I do. So we really do appreciate all of the hard work that you guys do. Hopefully someday there will be no war and you guys can do something else. But until then, thanks for defending our freedom. I'm Jarvis for the panel, Jason Shelkey, Trey Downey, Jose Youngs. Keep living the MMA Corner lifestyle. Peace out.